Hey, what's up? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about Alterous attraction, what it is, what it can feel like, and why I'm so glad there's a word for that. I've mentioned Alterous attraction in some of my other videos, and every time I do, I always get comments from people who are very excited that someone else knows what that is. So I thought, why not make a whole video just about that? To get started, I want to define Alterous attraction for anyone who may be unfamiliar. And because this is a newer term, it first came into use around 2015, I'm going to share several different definitions and explanations just to make sure I give y'all the full picture. First and foremost is the post from this person who coined the term, Tumblr user Schizotypal Scully, who defines Alterous attraction as attraction that can only be described as a desire for emotional closeness because neither romantic or platonic attraction is accurate. And what I think is most interesting here is the note clarifying that someone who experiences Alterous attraction may experience varying degrees of attraction that is identifiable as romantic or platonic, but ultimately feel discomfort, unease, or just a sense of inaccuracy in calling it wholly romantic or platonic. That description seems like it might have given rise to this other post reply from Tumblr user Pastel Roswell, who popularized the term Alterous attraction. That reply says, I see people saying it's between platonic and romantic instead of being able to be both that and completely unrelated to it. It's like a non-binary love, the binary being platonic and romantic, and it can diverge from those in many ways. That sentiment is something I relate to a lot as someone whose gender is non-binary. I get similarly frustrated when people think non-binary means a gender that's halfway between man and woman, when in reality it's an umbrella term for any gender that doesn't strictly fit into either the man or woman category. And with Alterous attraction, it's kind of the same deal. It's not just a type of attraction that sits halfway between platonic and romantic. It might be neither, it might be both, it might be something else entirely. It might be impossible to describe within a platonic romantic kind of framework. And that's why I'm presenting multiple definitions of Alterous attraction in this video, to convey the full complexity of the term. So here are a few other ones. From the LGBTQIA+ wiki, Alterous attraction is defined as a form of emotional attraction and desire for emotional closeness. It describes a feeling that is not necessarily platonic, but is also not romantic in nature. For some, it may be in between romantic and platonic attraction, and for others, it may be completely separate from the romantic-platonic distinction. From aromanticism.org, Alterous attraction is defined as an interest or desire for emotional closeness without necessarily being platonic and/or romantic. From the Aromantics wiki, Alterous attraction is defined as an attraction and desire for an emotional closeness with a person that exists in between romantic and platonic feelings. It doesn't just mean wanting to date your friend or someone who is close to you, it's more like wanting your partners to be your lovers and best friends. I feel like this one isn't as inclusive or expansive as the definition from the person who coined the term or a lot of the other definitions floating around out there, but again, that's why I wanted to show a variety. I highly recommend searching the term Alterous attraction and looking at different definitions and discussion threads across various websites to get the full picture of how this term is used. Two other things I want to mention in the context of the term Alterous attraction and what it means. First is the word mesh, which came up in several of the definitions I showed. In aromantic spectrum circles, mesh is analogous to the term crush for romantic attraction and squish for platonic attraction. So if you're attracted to someone in an Alterous way, you could say you have a mesh on them. And second is something that I like to call Schrodinger's dates, which is when you go out on something which could either be a romantic date or a platonic hangout, but you're not entirely sure what it is. So much like Schrodinger's cat can be considered neither alive nor dead until you open the box and see, a Schrodinger's date can be considered neither romantic nor platonic until someone specifies which one it's supposed to be. One thing I've discovered is that if I go on a Schrodinger's date with a crush, it's kind of a nightmare because I am a nervous wreck inside stressing about what kind of date it is and whether the other person has a crush on me too. But if I go on a Schrodinger's date with a mesh, it's the best thing ever because I don't care what kind of date it is, I'm just vibing and having a great time. Okay, so now that you know what Alterous attraction is, why do we need a word for that? Why is this term so useful? Just speaking from my personal experience, as someone on the gray part of the aromantic spectrum, I often struggle to tell the difference between platonic and romantic feelings. And in particular, as a demiromantic, the rare romantic feelings I do have always start out as platonic feelings first, because I can't feel romantic attraction for anyone unless we have an emotional bond. So when a crush always involves platonic feelings that later morph into romantic feelings, it can be confusing, if not impossible, to tell exactly how I'm attracted to someone. That's why I'm so glad the term Alterous attraction exists. I like having a way to categorize the very intense feelings I sometimes feel that don't fit neatly into this platonic romantic binary. And I know that many others on the aromantic spectrum find the term Alterous attraction useful as well. I actually think it could be a useful term for anyone because whether you're on the aromantic spectrum or not, romantic and platonic feelings are not always so clear-cut. And now for the burning question, what does Alterous attraction actually feel like? Of course, every person will have a different answer to that, but I want to share what it feels like for me in case any of y'all can relate. So, I experience Alterous attraction as something that's stronger or more intense than platonic attraction, but not quite the same as romantic attraction either. When I say Alterous attraction feels stronger than platonic attraction, I mean if platonic attraction is I think this person is cool and want to be their friend, Alterous attraction is more like I feel really close to this person and want to get even closer on an emotional level. If platonic attraction is I really enjoy spending time with this person, Alterous attraction is I want to spend a lot more time with this person and I really look forward to every chance we get to hang out. So it's like platonic plus something extra, if that makes sense. And then when I compare Alterous attraction to romantic attraction, it's similar in that I feel deeply connected to the other person, think about them a lot, want to make them happy, all of that. But it's different because I'm not imagining things like going on dates with them, holding their hand or kissing them, getting into a relationship with them, building a future with them as my partner, any of that. It's like it has all the fun parts of romantic attraction, but none of the stress. That honestly makes Alterous attraction my favorite type of attraction. The only hint of danger is that it could turn into romantic attraction at some point, but even if I sense that it has that potential, I can still enjoy Alterous attraction for what it is. In a video I made about the split attraction model, I mentioned how whenever I find myself attracted to someone, I ask myself a series of questions to try to figure out what type of attraction it is. And if the answers are unclear, that's when I file it under Alterous attraction. Sometimes until further notice, sometimes indefinitely. But I didn't have the tools to do that before I knew about the split attraction model or what Alterous attraction was or how my orientation worked. So back then, I just got confused by attraction most of the time. And now I want to share some examples of what it was like to experience Alterous attraction both before and after I knew what it was. Example 1 was a friend of mine in high school who was always a blast to hang out with, had a wicked sense of humor, was pretty good looking, all things that could have easily spelled the recipe for a crush. But my feelings for him were different than a crush, even though I could never quite put my finger on how. I did have that extra strong sense of, yes, I like this, more of this please, every time we hung out. But I didn't have any desire to date him, even though part of me felt like I should, at least on paper. In fact, if he had asked me out, I don't think I would have said an outright no, even though I also wouldn't have felt fully comfortable saying yes. Looking back, this was totally Alterous attraction, but at the time I had no context for what I was feeling. So I was just like, what the heck is this? And I had several other friendships in high school and college that followed a very similar pattern. Example 2 was a guy I met through swing dancing in college, and the complicating factor with him was sensual attraction. I don't usually experience sensual attraction outside of romantic attraction, so when it does happen, it catches me off guard because it's so rare. And sometimes it does make me think, is this a crush? With this guy, because I met him at a swing dance, there was physical contact through dancing right away. And we were having so much fun and such a great conversation that we ended up dancing together for 4 hours straight. Then we kept dancing and hanging out once a week at the ballroom club on campus. Similar to what I talked about in example 1, with this guy, I also didn't have clear-cut romantic feelings. I looked forward to seeing him at ballroom club, but I didn't think about him constantly and miss him during the rest of the week in between. I didn't think about going on dates with him. But I did have a more than usual amount of fun with him and enjoyed the physical closeness of dancing. I even think if he'd wanted to hold hands or cuddle outside of dancing, I probably wouldn't have said no. And who knows what I might have said if he'd asked me on a date. But in either case, I never would have initiated. So yeah, another case of what's pretty clearly Alterous attraction in hindsight, but was really confusing for me at the time. Example 3 was a friend I met through musical theater during college. We were in a couple of shows together. And the big complicating factor with this guy was that he was gay. And I'm gay too, but I'm also trans, and this was almost a decade before I would figure that out. So at the time, I was still operating under the false assumption that I was a straight woman, and therefore gay men were platonic friends and never romantic prospects, no matter how cute I thought they were. This guy was not only very cute, but also an extremely close friend. And sort of like the ballroom guy from example 2, with this guy there was something akin to sensual attraction, or maybe more like sensual comfort. I'm generally pretty touch averse, but I was totally fine with this guy being physically affectionate with me in ways that I would have found really weird with any of my other platonic friends. Like, he would just hold my hand or cuddle with me sometimes, and for some reason it felt completely safe and natural. But it also didn't feel the same as the type of sensual attraction that normally accompanies romantic attraction for me. And I didn't have any other indicators of romantic feelings for this guy either. Our dynamic felt exactly like the fag-hag dynamic I had with all of my other gay friends, just with more touching and more emotional closeness. So not romantic, but still beyond platonic, which definitely confused the heck out of me at the time. Example 4 is one where I experienced Alterous attraction that later turned into romantic attraction, which isn't something that happened with examples 1 through 3. Example 4 is technically 2 examples in one because it happened twice with the same person. And I'm not proud of this, but I actually ended up dating him twice as well. The first time I felt Alterous attraction for him was when we were in high school. We were friends, and I had those platonic but also kinda something extra feelings about him through the first 6 months or so of our friendship. But I distinctly remember the moment when it turned into full-blown romantic feelings. We were at a school dance, and we ended up slow dancing together to My Immortal by Evanescence. Yes, I am really dating myself here. And right after the song ended, I had to go in the bathroom and splash cold water on my face because I was blushing so hard. And I thought, uh-oh, it's the curse. So a few months and some awkward confessions later, we went on our first date, and then we were in a romantic relationship for almost a year after that. We broke up due to various life circumstances making it difficult for us to see each other rather than having any sort of falling out. But unfortunately, our friendship later faded away too when I got into a relationship with someone else, and I thought that it would be too weird to stay friends with my ex while starting a new relationship. But we reconnected years later as adults who had just graduated from college and started hanging out as friends again. And almost immediately I felt myself go back into that place of platonic feelings but also something more. Part of me knew the potential for romance was there because it had happened once already, but just like the last time, I was in that Alterous attraction zone for about 6 months, not entirely sure how I felt. Then he asked me out again while my feelings were still Alterous and had not yet turned romantic, and I was still very uncertain about everything. But I still said yes, and we started our second relationship. And about a month or 2 into that relationship was when my full-blown romantic feelings came back. If you've seen any of my other videos where I've talked about this relationship, then you know it ultimately didn't work out. But we did have 2 years together the second time around, and I can't say I regret any of it because I learned so much from that experience, including the fact that I'm asexual. I wouldn't exactly recommend dating the same person twice. I feel like exes are exes for a reason after all. And I'm not sure I'd recommend dating someone that you're not romantically attracted to either, even if you can tell the potential is there. But I do think it's interesting how my feelings about my ex took a very similar path from Alterous to romantic attraction 2 different times more than 5 years apart. Example 5 is another one where Alterous attraction eventually turned into romantic attraction, and what made this one way different from all my previous experiences with Alterous attraction was that it developed during an online friendship. Up to that point, I'd never had any close friends I met online. I'd had some casual acquaintances and fandom mutuals, but this guy connected with me through some social media pages for our local cosplay nerd scene and started a friendship over daily DMs. And my feelings for him remained strictly platonic until we met in person for the first time at a comic convention. Something about actually being in his presence turned the tide from platonic attraction to that confusing feeling of platonic plus more. And that only got stronger as we kept getting closer through our messages and eventually hung out in person again. I could tell my attraction had shifted from Alterous to romantic when I went to the beach and spent the whole week wishing he was there with me. When my thoughts are that consumed by someone else on vacation, that's when I'm like, yep, I'm screwed, it's the curse. By the way, even though that case of Alterous attraction did turn into romantic attraction, our friendship never turned into a romantic relationship for many reasons. My final 2 examples are ones that happened after I learned what Alterous attraction was, so I was finally able to put a word to what I was feeling as I was feeling it. And that was huge for me because not being confused by my feelings made it possible to just enjoy them. So, example 6 was a fellow cosplayer I'd met through mutual friends, and as he and I became closer friends and I felt my feelings start to shift towards something more than platonic but different from romantic, for the first time in my life I was like, oh, I know what this is, it's a mesh. This one had a lot of the same characteristics as my past meshes. I enjoyed spending time with him more than what I would consider a normal amount, and I felt an extra spark of excitement whenever he would talk to me. But I didn't think about him constantly, wish we were together whenever he wasn't there, want to do things like go on dates with him or kiss him, etc. There was also one more big thing that let me know my feelings weren't romantic. When he told me he had a crush on someone, I didn't feel any kind of disappointment. I was just happy for him. If I'd had a crush on him, I would have outwardly expressed that I was happy for him, but I definitely would have been disappointed inside. So that was one of the clearest signs that this was a mesh and not a crush. Eventually, this guy moved to a different city where we barely got to see each other anymore, and my feelings ended up shifting from Alterous back to platonic after a while. But that was the first time I knew what Alterous attraction was as it was happening. And finally, example 7 was another cosplayer who I'd known as a casual acquaintance for quite some time, but became an actual friend when we bonded over our mutual love of the same fandom, and eventually he grew to be a very close friend. One night we'd both been invited to a big group dinner with a bunch of mutual friends, and when he got there, I didn't recognize him at first because he was dressed different than usual and had a new haircut, and I remember seeing him across the room and thinking, oh, that guy's really cute. Wait, that's my friend. What? And even though it kind of took me by surprise that I was just now noticing how good looking my friend was apparently, I didn't think it was that big a deal, because I have plenty of good looking friends and I do experience aesthetic attraction all the time. But after that night, every time I hung out with this particular friend, I started noticing that I was enjoying his company more than the usual amount and looking forward to spending more time with him, but also not feeling the things I usually feel when it's a crush. So I was like, hey, look, it's a mesh. With that guy, my feelings actually stayed Alterous for a good 4 or 5 years, I think, which is the longest mesh I've ever had. My other ones have either turned into a crush or veered back into a squish after a few months to a year. At this point, my feelings for this guy have gone back to platonic, but even now, sometimes I'll still look at him and think, dang, he really is pretty though, in a strictly platonic plus aesthetic kind of way. So, that wraps up my examples of what Alterous attraction has felt like for me, and now is where I would like to turn the conversation over to you. Is Alterous attraction something you were familiar with before you watched this video? Is it something you've experienced before? Is it something you experience frequently? And if so, what has your experience with it been like? And whether you've ever felt Alterous attraction or not, what questions do you have about all this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I'm GC Kenzie across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. I've got more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person. I've got cosplay music videos, cosplay tutorials, a whole bunch of cool resources about voice changes on testosterone for singers right here on this channel. So make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope you enjoyed this one and learned something new, and I will see you on the next one.